Ray stood before the massive window in the Stellar Council's assignment chamber. His 4 eyes narrowed as he stared at the holographic display of Earth floating before him. The blue planet rotated slowly, mocking him with each turn. His scaled fingers tightened around the assignment tablet until the device creaked in protest. "This must be a mistake," he said, turning to face Council Director Smith. The older alien's silver skin reflected the soft light of the chamber. "I am one of our most experienced diplomats. Surely you can't mean to send me to that backwater world." The director's expression remained neutral, though Ray could have sworn he saw amusement in those golden eyes. "The assignment is final. Ambassador Ray, Earth is our newest member in the Stellar Council, and they require our most experienced representatives." Ray's tail twitched in irritation, a gesture he usually managed to control in diplomatic settings. They discovered faster-than-light travel barely 5 years ago. They still use combustion engines on their planet's surface. "Director, they eat actual dead animals for sustenance." And yet, the director said quietly, "they managed to solve the Kármán equations in half the time it took our scientists. They've already contributed 3 new medical procedures to our database. Their entertainment broadcasts are becoming quite popular in the outer rings." Entertainment. Ray spat the word like it was poison. "They waste countless hours on fiction and games while their planet faces real problems. It's inefficient. It's chaos." The director walked to his desk, his movements deliberately slow. "Perhaps that's exactly why you need this assignment, Ray. Your last 3 postings have been problematic." Ray felt his scales flush purple with embarrassment. The incident with the Centaurian trade agreement hadn't been entirely his fault. And how was he supposed to know that the Proximan delegate would be so offended by logical optimization suggestions? "Director, please. There must be someone else. The matter is settled." The director's voice took on the hard edge that had made him famous in negotiations across 12 galaxies. "You leave in 3 days. I suggest you spend that time studying Earth's customs instead of complaining about them." Ray watched helplessly as the director glided out of the chamber, leaving him alone with the slowly rotating hologram of his new assignment. He pulled up Earth's basic data on his tablet, each fact making his scales crawl. Population, 8 billion. Uncontrolled breeding. Languages, over 7,000. Absurdly inefficient. Governments, multiple competing systems. Chaos. Climate control, minimal. Primitive. Entertainment industry revenue, larger than some planetary GDPs. Wasteful. "Barely spacefaring apes," he muttered, walking through the hologram of Earth. The image sparkled around him, unperturbed by his disdain. "They'll probably try to feed me something called a hamburger and expect me to watch their movies about impossible scenarios." In his quarters that evening, Ray packed his belongings while watching required briefing videos about Earth. The humans in them were always smiling, always moving, always making noise. They seemed incapable of proper order. A message pinged on his tablet. His last appointment had been scheduled, the traditional farewell ceremony where diplomats received blessings for their new assignments. Ray felt bile rise in his secondary stomach. He'd have to stand there while his colleagues tried to hide their smirks. Everyone would know this was a punishment posting. 3 years, he said to his reflection in the window. 3 years among primitives who think sending metal cylinders with flames coming out the bottom is the height of sophistication. The stars twinkled back at him, indifferent to his suffering. Somewhere out there, that blue marble of a planet waited for him, filled with its billions of chaotic, inefficient, emotional inhabitants. Ray had faced trade negotiations with the notoriously difficult rock hives of Betelgeuse. He'd survived 3 wars, 2 economic collapses, and 1 artificial intelligence uprising. But somehow he knew that Earth would be his greatest challenge yet, and not in any of the ways that would look good on his record. "At least," he muttered, setting his translator to begin downloading English, "they haven't blown themselves up yet, though there's still time for that." The Earth Embassy in Geneva looked nothing like Ray had expected. Instead of the crude concrete blocks he'd imagined, the building was a beautiful mix of old stone architecture and modern glass. Sunlight played across its surface, creating patterns that even he had to admit were pleasing to the eye. Not that he would ever say that out loud. Ambassador Ray, a human male, approached him, tablet in hand. "I'm Tom Wells, your assistant during your stay on Earth. Welcome to Geneva." Ray studied the human carefully. Tom wore what his briefing called a suit, and his short brown hair was neatly combed. He stood straight and professional, though his face had that annoying human expression called a smile. "The building is smaller than standard," Ray said, ignoring the welcome. "How you maintain proper atmospheric conditions with such inefficient design?" To his annoyance, Tom's smile didn't fade. "We use a combination of traditional and modern systems. Would you like a tour? The building actually has some fascinating technological innovations." Before Ray could refuse, a group of human children pressed their faces against the embassy's outer fence. Their eyes went wide at the sight of him. "Look, a real alien," one shouted. They waved enthusiastically. Ray's scales flushed purple with embarrassment. On any civilized world, such behavior would be punished. But Tom just waved back at the children, making them giggle with delight. "Surely you don't allow this kind of disruption regularly," Ray said, hurrying inside the building. "Kids are naturally curious," Tom replied, following him. "We find it's better to encourage their interest in alien cultures. Many of them might become diplomats themselves one day." The inside of the embassy was worse than Ray had feared. Humans walked in all directions, talking loudly. Some carried cups of a brown liquid that his sensors identified as coffee. Music played softly in the background. Another waste of energy. "Your first meeting is in an hour," Tom said, checking his tablet. "The Swiss foreign minister wants to discuss." A loud alarm cut through the air. Ray's defensive scales rippled automatically, but none of the humans seemed properly terrified. "Security breach in Section C," a calm voice announced. "Unknown device detected." Ray expected panic. Instead, he watched in confusion as the humans quickly but calmly moved to predetermined positions. Tom was already on his tablet, coordinating with security. "Ambassador, please stay here," Tom said firmly. "Our security team will." "This is exactly what happens in an underdeveloped society," Ray began, but stopped when he saw what was happening outside his window. A small security team had surrounded a suspicious package. Instead of using standard containment fields, one human approached it carefully in what looked like primitive protective gear. The human actually touched the package, examining it by hand. "Are they insane?" Ray demanded. "They'll be killed." "Watch," Tom said quietly. The human in protective gear suddenly smiled and stood up. They held up what looked like a child's toy, some kind of flying device with cameras attached. "False alarm," Tom reported, reading from his tablet. "Just a lost drone from the school next door." The kids were trying to get pictures of the embassy. Ray struggled to process what he'd just seen. The humans had handled a potential bomb threat without energy shields, without evacuation, and without causing panic. The security team was now talking to the children who owned the drone, explaining why they couldn't fly it near the embassy. "Your methods are unusual," Ray said finally. "But effective," Tom replied. "Now about that meeting with the foreign minister." Ray followed his assistant down the hall, his mind racing. The humans were still primitive and chaotic, but he had to admit they handled the security incident with surprising competence. Perhaps this assignment wouldn't be quite as simple as he'd thought. Though whether that was good or bad, he wasn't sure yet. At least they hadn't tried to feed him a hamburger, yet. After 2 weeks on Earth, Ray's frustration had reached new heights. He sat in his office, staring at reports that made his scales itch with irritation. Humans did everything the hard way, and they seemed proud of it. "Another problem, Ambassador?" Tom asked, entering with the morning's diplomatic messages. "These humans," Ray gestured at his screen, "are having a debate about space traffic laws that should take 10 minutes. They've been arguing for 3 days. Different countries have different concerns, Tom explained patiently. We like to make sure everyone's voice is heard. Ray's tail twitched. Inefficient. A simple mathematical formula would. The emergency alert system interrupted him. A holographic display appeared in the center of the room, showing 3 ships near Earth's orbit. 2 were human cargo vessels. The third was a known pirate ship from the Outer Rim. Pirates. Here. Ray stood up, shocked. How did they get past your defenses? Tom was already on his communication device. They used some kind of new cloaking technology. Our ships are responding now. Ray watched the display with growing horror. The human ships were older models, barely armed. The pirate vessel was a top-of-the-line warship. By all logical calculations, this would be a massacre. But the humans didn't seem to know they were supposed to lose. The first cargo ship did something Ray had never seen before. It released its cargo containers in a spiral pattern, creating an obstacle course in space. The second ship positioned itself behind this makeshift barrier. What are they doing? Ray demanded. They should surrender. This is suicide. Just watch, Tom said, his eyes glued to the display. The pirate ship charged forward, its weapons powering up. But the scattered cargo containers forced it to slow down and maneuver carefully. As it did, the second cargo ship launched what looked like primitive mining drones. Those aren't weapons, Ray said. They're maintenance robots. The small drones swarmed the pirate ship. Instead of attacking, they attached themselves to its hull and began cutting power lines. The pirates' weapons went dark. Their engines sputtered. Impossible, Ray whispered. Earth's defense forces arrived minutes later to find a dead-in-space pirate vessel, trapped in a web of deactivated cargo containers and clever improvisation. But what happened next shocked Ray even more. Instead of destroying the pirate ship, the humans captured it. They actually rescued the pirates from their powerless vessel. Ray watched in disbelief as medical teams treated the pirates' injuries. Why help them? He asked Tom. They're criminals. The logical response would be execution. Tom smiled. We believe everyone deserves a chance to change. Those pirates might have valuable information about others using the same technology. And who knows, maybe some of them will choose a different path after experiencing mercy. Ray sank back into his chair. In all his years of diplomatic service, he'd never seen anything like this. The humans had won using farming tools and cargo containers. They'd succeeded by being illogical and unpredictable. And then, at the moment of victory, they'd chosen mercy over vengeance. Your species makes no sense, he told Tom. That's one of our best features, Tom replied. It makes us hard to beat. Ray looked again at the space traffic law debate on his screen. Perhaps there was something to be said for considering all voices, for finding unusual solutions, for being unpredictable. Would you like to join us for lunch? Tom asked. The cafeteria is serving hamburgers today. Ray's scales rippled with what might have been amusement. Very well, he said. It's time I tried this famous human food. After all, he thought, if humans could turn cargo containers into weapons and pirates into potential allies, maybe their food deserved a chance too. Ray stared at the invitation on his desk with all 4 eyes, hoping it would somehow disappear. The golden letters remained stubbornly visible. Annual Geneva Symphony Orchestra performance. Diplomatic Corps special event. I can't avoid this one, can I? He asked Tom, who stood nearby with an amused expression. It's a mandatory cultural exchange event, Tom confirmed. All ambassadors are required to attend. Besides, you might enjoy it. Ray's scales shifted to a doubtful shade of blue-gray. Humans gather in to watch other humans make noise with primitive devices. For 3 hours. It's called music, Ambassador, Tom said patiently. And this orchestra is one of the best in the world. That evening, Ray found himself sitting in the grand concert hall, uncomfortable in his formal diplomatic robes. The hall was beautiful, he had to admit, with high ceilings and intricate decorations. Other alien diplomats sat nearby, some looking as uncertain as he felt. "Why do they need so many different instruments?" he whispered to Tom. "One efficient sound-producing machine would be more logical." "Sheh," Tom replied gently. "Just listen." The lights dimmed. Humans in black clothing took their places on stage. Ray noticed how they all held different instruments, some with strings, others made of metal or wood. Highly inefficient, just as he'd thought. Then the music began. The first notes were soft, like raindrops falling in a quiet forest. Ray's sensitive hearing picked up each individual sound, but somehow they flowed together into something more. The music grew stronger, and he felt his scales tingling in response to the vibrations. "What's happening?" he whispered, alarmed at his physical reaction. "That's Beethoven's Fifth Symphony," Tom whispered back, "written by a human who was deaf. He couldn't hear his own music." Ray's confusion deepened. Then how? He felt it. In his heart, in his soul. Ray wanted to argue that this made no logical sense, but the music swept away his objections. It rose and fell like waves, telling a story without words. He saw struggle in the deep notes, hope in the high ones. His scales changed colors with each movement, responding to emotions he didn't know he could feel. In the middle of a particularly powerful section, Ray noticed something extraordinary. The musicians weren't just playing. They were feeling every note. Their faces showed concentration, joy, and something deeper. They moved with the music as if it was part of them. "They're not doing this for any practical purpose, are they?" Ray asked during a quiet moment. Tom shook his head. "Art doesn't need a purpose beyond itself. We create music because it makes life more beautiful." "Beautiful," Ray repeated the word softly. His species had no equivalent concept. They had decoration, yes, but it always served a function. This was different. The final movement began, and Ray found himself completely lost in the sound. His diplomatic training, his logical objections, his sense of superiority, all fell away. For the first time, he understood something about humans that couldn't be put into reports or explained with facts. When the last note faded, Ray sat in silence while the humans around him clapped enthusiastically. He noticed moisture on his scales, something that hadn't happened since he was a hatchling. "Are you crying?" Tom asked gently. "Impossible," Ray said, quickly wiping his scales. "My species doesn't cry." But something had changed inside him. He could still feel the music echoing in his bones, stirring emotions he didn't have names for. Would they? He hesitated. Would they play again? Tom smiled. "There's an encore coming up. And you know, the orchestra performs every month." Ray sat back in his chair, scales shimmering with anticipation. Perhaps there were some human inefficiencies worth preserving after all. The emergency meeting room of Earth's Geneva embassy was crowded with worried faces. On the main screen, a massive alien warship from the Stone Empire hung in orbit, its weapons pointed at Earth. Ray had seen many diplomatic crises before, but this one made his scales turn pale. "They're demanding we hand over the pirate prisoners," Tom explained to the gathered ambassadors. "They claim the pirates stole important technology from them." Ray expected panic. He expected the humans to immediately surrender to the much stronger alien force. Instead, they surprised him again. "The pirates have requested asylum," the human diplomat said calmly. "Under Earth's laws and galactic treaties, we must give their request fair consideration." "Fair consideration?" Ray burst out. "The Stone Empire has enough firepower to turn half your planet to ash." "You can't possibly." "Ambassador Ray," Tom interrupted gently, "would you pull up the historical file I prepared?" Confused, Ray opened the document on his tablet. His eyes widened as he read. "These are Earth's historical conflicts," Tom explained to the room. "Times when humans face seemingly impossible odds. The small Greek army against the Persian Empire. The few hundred British pilots against thousands of enemy aircraft. a handful of ships crossing vast oceans to explore unknown worlds. But those were different times, Ray argued. More primitive. The principle remains the same, the human diplomat said. We don't abandon our principles just because we're afraid. Those pirates came to us for help. They're trying to change their lives. We'll protect them while investigating their claims fairly. Ray watched in amazement as the humans began working on a solution. Instead of cowering, they started making plans. Some worked on diplomatic messages, others prepared defense strategies, and still others began investigating the Stone Empire's claims about the stolen technology. Your species is either incredibly brave or completely insane, Ray told Tom as they walked to the communication center. Tom smiled. Maybe a bit of both. But here's something we've learned from history. Bullies don't expect you to stand up to them. That alone can change everything. Over the next 2 days, Ray watched the humans work with a dedication he'd never seen before. They sent carefully worded messages to the Stone Empire. They gathered evidence. They even managed to get other alien species interested in the situation. But what impressed Ray most was how they treated the pirates during this crisis. Instead of locking them up, the humans let them help. One pirate turned out to be an expert on Stone Empire technology. Another had valuable information about their military tactics. You turned your enemies into allies, Ray said wonderingly. Again. Everyone deserves a chance to be better, Tom replied. Sometimes they just need someone to believe in them. The crisis reached its peak when the Stone Empire threatened to attack. But by then, Earth had gathered enough evidence to prove the technology had actually been stolen from another species entirely. The pirates' information had been crucial in uncovering this truth. When the Stone Empire finally backed down, Ray found himself cheering along with the humans. He'd just watched them face down one of the most powerful forces in the galaxy using nothing but courage, clever diplomacy, and an unshakable belief in doing what was right. I need to update my report to the Stellar Council, Ray told Tom later that day. Oh, what will you tell them? Ray's scales shifted to a proud purple color. That I may have been wrong about humans. Your species isn't primitive at all. You're just different. And maybe that's exactly what the galaxy needs. Tom grinned. High praise from someone who wouldn't even try a hamburger 2 months ago. Don't push it, Ray said, but his scales rippled with amusement. Though I must admit, your Earth food isn't as terrible as I feared. 6 months into his Earth assignment, Ray found himself doing something that would have horrified his earlier self. He was hosting a dinner party. His apartment in Geneva was filled with both human and alien guests, and the sound of laughter echoed off the walls. Try the pizza, Ambassador Reed, Ray said to his fellow alien diplomat. The humans call it comfort food. I was skeptical at first, but now I understand why. Tom watched from nearby, trying to hide his smile. The same ambassador who once refused to touch human food was now enthusiastically explaining the concept of cheese to a confused alien. Your scales are a different color, one of the human guests noticed. They're kind of golden. Ray hadn't realized it, but she was right. His scales had taken on a warm, peaceful golden hue, a color his species showed when they felt truly content. Must be the lighting, he said quickly, but Tom knew better. The next day at the embassy, Ray faced a challenging diplomatic situation. 2 countries were arguing about sharing space station docking rights. In the past, he would have pushed for a purely logical solution based on numbers and efficiency. Instead, he tried something new. Tell me about your concerns, he said to both parties. Not your official positions, your real worries. He listened as they talked about jobs, about opportunities for their young people, about dreams of space exploration. Just like humans had listened to him, even when he'd been rude and dismissive. To everyone's surprise, Ray suggested they turn the space station into a joint training facility. Both countries would share it, teaching their young people together. It wasn't the most efficient solution, but it was one that addressed the human element. That was very human of you, Tom said afterward. I'll take that as a compliment, Ray replied. surprising them both. Later that week, Ray attended another orchestra performance. This time, he didn't need any convincing. He'd started downloading human music to listen to during his free time, finding that each style, from classical to jazz to rock, showed him a different facet of humanity. He even caught himself humming sometimes, another habit that would have mortified him 6 months ago. One morning, Ray was reviewing his old reports to the Stellar Council. His first ones were full of complaints about human inefficiency and chaos. His newest report was different. Humans approach problems in unexpected ways, he had written. They value emotional intelligence alongside logical thinking. Their adaptability is not a weakness, but a strength. Their art and music are not wastes of time, but tools for understanding life more deeply. Their kindness to enemies is not foolish, but transformative. Getting sentimental in your old age, Tom teased, reading over his shoulder. Practical observation, Ray corrected him, but his scales rippled with amusement. The Stellar Council needs to understand that human methods, while different, are valid and often effective. That evening, Ray did something unprecedented. He walked home instead of taking a transport. He wanted to feel the cool air, to watch the sunset paint the sky in colors that reminded him of the orchestra's music. He stopped to help a child retrieve a lost ball, exchanged greetings with his human neighbors, and even patted a dog, though he still found Earth pets slightly alarming. In his apartment, Ray looked at his reflection in the window. His scales shimmered with that same golden contentment. 6 months ago, he had seen Earth as a punishment posting. Now, he said to himself, I might actually miss this place when I leave. The thought surprised him less than it should have. Ray stood in the same chamber where he had received his Earth assignment 1 year ago. The hologram of Earth still rotated slowly before him, but this time, he found himself smiling at it. Director Smith sat behind his desk, reading Ray's latest report. You've requested to extend your Earth posting, the director said, looking up with surprise. The same posting you once called a punishment. Yes, Director. Ray's scales shimmered with determination. But first, I request permission to address the full Stellar Council. The director's eyes narrowed. About Earth. About everything we've gotten wrong about humans. 2 days later, Ray faced the assembled council. Representatives from hundreds of advanced civilizations watched him with varying degrees of curiosity and skepticism. 1 year ago, he would have shared their doubts about humans. Now he stood ready to defend them. Esteemed council members, Ray began. 1 year ago, I thought being sent to Earth was an insult. I was wrong. What I found there wasn't a primitive species stumbling into space. I found something far more valuable. A civilization that could teach us all how to be better. He touched his tablet, and images appeared around the chamber. Human art, music performances, scientific achievements, and moments of kindness. We call them inefficient because they debate instead of calculating. But their debates bring new ideas we'd never consider. We call them primitive because they still feel strong emotions. But those emotions drive them to create art that can move even beings like us to tears. Ray showed them the incident with the space pirates, now reformed, and working as legitimate traders. He showed them how Earth handled the Stone Empire crisis. With each example, he felt the Council's attention sharpen. They turned their enemies into friends. They faced down a superior force with courage and wisdom. They showed mercy when they could have chosen vengeance, and they did it all while making time for what they call the little things in life. Music, art, food, friendship. His scales glowed with pride as he continued. My assistant Tom once told me that humanity's greatest strength is being unpredictable. He was right. They solve problems in ways we'd never imagine because they're not bound by our rigid logic. They see possibilities where we see only chaos. Ray played a recording of the orchestra he'd come to love. Several council members shifted uncomfortably at the emotional impact of the music. This is what we've been missing, Ray said softly. The power of doing things not because they're efficient, but because they make life more beautiful, more meaningful. He straightened to his full height. I request not only to continue my posting on Earth, but to recommend increased cultural exchange with humans. We need their creativity, their compassion, and yes, even their beautiful inefficiency. The chamber erupted in discussion. Ray waited patiently, his scales now a confident gold. Finally, Director Smith spoke. Ambassador Ray, 1 year ago you couldn't wait to leave Earth. Now you want to stay. The change in you is remarkable. The humans changed me, Ray said simply. They taught me that being different isn't wrong, that emotions aren't weakness, that sometimes the longest way around a problem is actually the best solution. The council voted. Ray's request was approved. Later that day, he sent a message to Tom. Guess who's staying on Earth? Tom's reply came quickly. Great news. The orchestra is playing next week, and I saved you a ticket. Also, that pizza place you like is opening a new location. Ray's scales rippled with joy as he looked out at the Geneva sunset. 1 year ago, he'd seen Earth as a backwater posting. Now he finally understood the truth. Sometimes the best gifts come in the most unexpected packages. And Earth, with all its wonderful chaos, had been the greatest gift of all.